My name is Jaekeb Harper. I am a history of science, technology, and medicine major, and I'm a senior. I'm a percussionist. I play mostly marching bass at this point, but I'll switch on to snare or cymbals as we need. I've been in the band all 4 years of my Hopkins career. I joined sort of as soon as I could my freshman year, and then stepped up into leadership my junior year, and I'm now the president of the Pep Band. I think what makes the Pep Band special really is the community part of it. We come together every week to sort of get a break from all the other things going on in our lives, all of the classes, home stuff, what have you, to make music and enjoy time together as a community. That's really what it's here for. My favorite here recently has been Narco. This sort of, it's the only EDM song that we play, but it has a very heavy sort of percussion feature that I really enjoy. This pep band has been sort of the foundational community of my Hopkins experience. It's where a lot of the people that I know and trust and hang out with, etc., have come from. It has sort of become my social circle and a focus of really the center point of my Hopkins career.
1, 2,
graduated in 1973. I've been playing in the band since 1969 and played the trumpet. It was one of those things I did. I was in the band in high school and looking for activities when I came here and being kind of, lost.
Yes.
The band was the first thing I gravitated towards and just found a home. It's tough. I think it's the camaraderie between the people. It's a very fraternal kind of atmosphere. You make a lot of good friends here, and once I graduated, I kept coming back, and nobody stopped me, so here I am. Well, there are all kinds of them. They kind of changed a little bit over the years, but counting off of the goals started while I was an undergrad. It was one of those things. My roommate was from a big marching band school in Florida. I kept saying, we should be doing something. Nobody's doing anything. And we started counting the goals, and it caught on, and that's become a big band tradition ever since. Initially, when Conrad Gebelein, our original director, when Gebby was here, he was like a magnet. He drew people in, and we routinely had a band of 30, 40 people. And over the years, it kind of dwindled a little bit, it grew a little bit. Lately, as you've seen, the band is really getting back up to its original size. We draw 30 people, but it's always been here. I mean, there have been times when I played by myself. There have been times we've had bands of 3 or 4, but we're here. We're kind of obvious. There's not much that people don't know about the band, but there are a lot of alums, a lot of people like me, just keep coming back. I definitely hold the record now. I'm in my 56th year. What I was pursuing, even from the time I was an undergrad, was Gebby, our original founder, was here 56 years. Well, there was some matter of debate because his plaque at the end of the stadium says 57. So I said, let's see if I can do that. This is my 56th year.
My name is Marvin Larway. I am a senior here at Johns Hopkins, majoring in biomedical engineering with minors in applied math and statistics and music. I play pretty much anything that's low brass. Right now it's mostly trombone, but every once in a while you see me on baritone, you'll see me on tuba. Whatever needs a little power, oomph, I'm there. I joined because for me, my pep band was a very much a musical outlet for me. I knew I was getting into quite the rigorous environment, so being able to have a creative release, have some moments just to have fun, it was a very special time for me during high school, and I wanted to continue that here. And I'd say I'm blessed to be in a community such as Hopkins where I'm able to play and just cheer people on. Really, I like all of them, but if I had to have a very specific one, like shipping up to Boston's always been a favorite one for me. The impression that I get as well, always a very fun one. Just very cheerful. So very recently, just a tradition of creative excellence. And seeing the Pep Band grow from just like a ragtag team to truly a family. So I can't really put a name on a specific tradition, but just a family culture that we have now, it's a blessing to witness.
My name is Manny. I came here at Hopkins 2015 as a freshman, graduated in 2019. I've been in the band since 2015. We're now at 2025. And I joined first because I played music through high school, and then joined here, made a lot of friends. I enjoyed the sport of lacrosse, even though I'm from Long Island. Never really watched, but still learned here. And since then, I've been watching all those trips to Syracuse, North Carolina during football season, all across the state of Pennsylvania. Honestly, it's been great to make some great memories with the band, and it's kept me here. At least I'm in the area afterwards, and it's been great meeting new people and meeting some old ones. And then when alumni weekend comes, I get to see old friends all the time. It's been great, and I hope to be doing this for a lot longer than just that.
Good afternoon and welcome. Thank you so much for tuning in today as we celebrate one of the most spirited traditions of Johns Hopkins, the Pep Band. I'm Duane Melzer, and I'm a full-time administrator in arts and sciences, but on nights and weekends, I am the current Pep Band director. And whether you're here as a past member, a Blue Jay fan, or someone who's curious about energetic sounds echoing from Homewood Field, we are delighted that you joined us today. Today's program is all about the joy and legacy of the Pep Band. We'll be striking up its 100-plus year history, exploring its evolution, and hearing stories from the people who've kept the music going. We're thrilled to be joined by our wonderful lineup of guests, past and present, who've shaped the band's sound and spirit. Let me introduce them to you now. We have Jaekeb Harper, who is a senior in the Department of History, Science, and Medicine and Technology, and a percussionist who's been shaking things up with the Pep Band since his first year. He served as treasurer from 2023 to 2024 and is the current president. A passionate historian on the band itself, Jaekeb has been digging around in the archives and connecting with alumni to document the Pep Band's impressive 104-year history. We have Irv Litofsky, has been playing with the Hopkins Band since 1969, starting on its original director, Conrad Gaviline, and he's never really stopped. He's earned degrees in chemistry and forensic science and is a forensic scientist by career. Irv has been a mainstay at nearly every home football game and lacrosse game since graduation, and a whole lot of away games too. Pep Band is also a family affair for Irv, with his wife, daughters, and now granddaughters joining in on the fun. And finally, we have Nicoleen Willson, is the director of the Office of Arts and Innovation at Johns Hopkins, where she supports the creative development of students across dance, music, theater, and visual arts. Her office supports over 60 student art groups, helping bring more than 120 performances and events to campus each year, like the Pep Band. As a reminder, if you're tuning in live, Please feel free to use the chat feature below to share comments, questions, and stories during our Q&A. We'd love to hear from your pep band memories. We'll be monitoring the chat, and we'll do our best to get to as many of your questions as we can during the Q&A towards the end of the program. To get us started, I'm excited to hand things over to Jaekeb, who's been deep in the archives uncovering the pep band's roots, standout moments, and all the spirited milestones that have made it the lively force we know today. Jaekeb, take it away.
Hello, I'm super happy to be able to give this presentation. I'm going to walk through the band's history from the moment of its inception, actually just before, to set the stage, up to the present day. While I do this, you may hear a couple times other people jump in to share anecdotes that are here, particularly as we get closer to the modern day. So, I wanted to talk very briefly, set the stage of what was instrumental music at Hopkins before the band. And the answer to that really is an organization called the Musical Club, which was this big conglomeration of a bunch of little groups. Notably, there was the Glee Club, there was the Blue Jay Orchestra, and then sort of a rotating cast of smaller ensembles. Importantly to this story, the Mandolin Club. This is sort of foundational for us because all of the earliest members of the band, when it came together, were pulled pretty directly from both the Mandolin Club and the Blue Jay Orchestra. In fact, in both of these pictures here, which this here is the Mandolin Club, and this is the Blue Jay Orchestra as it existed, you will find a man named Mike Bowers. Bowers is the sort of founder of the band. The story goes that in the spring of 1921, he put a call out to all the instrumental musicians that he knew to start playing in the spring season of lacrosse that spring. He at the time was directing the Glee Club, directing the Mandolin Club, and directing the orchestra when he put out that call to start the band. He immediately dropped directing the Glee Club because he decided that was one too many things for him to be doing all at once. And it formed almost overnight. We have an explosion of activity. This is the earliest photo that we have of the band. This is from the 1922 yearbook. And I won't read this whole quote that I pulled here, but it sort of walks through part of the story that I just told, as well as showing that it was an instant sort of success on campus. It was voted the most active organization on campus a year after it started, and made a sort of life of its own. It wasn't part of the musical club, though it was sort of affiliated. And you can see a bit of that awkwardness in the first year in this photo. I pulled this photo into its own slide for one big reason, that it sort of encapsulates the whole early history of the band. There's three figures I'll point out to you. I hope my cursor is visible. It might not be now that I think about it. But this figure here is Mike Bowers, who is the first president of the band. This here is Emil Smith, who is the second president of the band. And this here is Fordyce Campbell, who is the third president of the band and ultimately led the band for 3 years. You can see a bit of the early identity of the band in that in 1922, less than a year after its founding, the band became part of ROTC. You see a figure here in ROTC uniform. This is fairly close to World War I, it's post-World War I. And both Emil Smith and Fordyce Campbell were active members of ROTC. And in the earliest days, this is really what the band is known for. We did play, I believe, both football and lacrosse games at the time, but we very quickly made a deal with ROTC that we would formally play their ceremonies, that we would march with them in exchange for uniforms and in exchange for instruments. This is also from, I believe, from that 1922 yearbook that shows us in what would have been one of the first major ceremonies that we played with the band. And this here is almost certainly Mike Bowers as well. There is one figure that looms large over the history of the band more than anyone else. That is a man named Konrad Gebelein, though most of us call him Gebby. Gebby was born in the late 1890s in Bavaria, in Germany, and ended up immigrating to the US in 1910. As far as we can tell, alone, and came immediately to Baltimore. He certainly had a life before the band. He taught music at an all-girls academy in Maryland, and he also had his own private studio that he taught music out of, and he maintained that well after he was affiliated with Hopkins. Although he could play trumpet, he did play with the band. He wrote tons of music for band. His main instrument and main passion did really seem to be plucked stringed instruments. He was a very talented guitarist, banjo player, and mandolineur. He served as heads of guilds for those instruments, which is a very interesting sort of interaction that he had with the community. He was very active in Baltimore. On top of him serving for Hopkins, he started the Baltimore Mandolin Orchestra. He was active with the Baltimore Symphony Orchestra. He worked for WBAL for a time and became a fairly important figure in the music scene of Baltimore in the early 20th century. He's important to our story because he was first hired by Hopkins in 1928, not to run the band, but to run what was then the Banjo Club, which had succeeded the Mandolin Club. He directed the Banjo Club for several years before, in 1931, a group of students that were familiar with him and his work in the musical club asked him to come and direct the band, and he became the first staff director of the band. Ultimately, we'll touch on this again later, but ultimately Gebby would serve as band director from then all the way to 1971, and then remained fairly active, if not officially the director, until his death in 1981. So really the first whole half of the band's history is really dominated by this one man. I wanted to put a note in here as well about the origins of the Hopkins tunes that we still play. I threw two up on screen here. To Win, which we play in lacrosse every time that the team scores a point, and Johnny Hopkins on to Victory, which we play on run-ons to the field as well as at the very end of the game. Both of these predate the band by quite a bit. These two versions here are pulled from 1922 songbook, so a year after the band may have been formed, but there's evidence that these were existing tunes at the time that were written mostly for chorus. A lot of the music of the early band was pulled from the glee clubs. Gebby would then arrange these for band, and they became the songs that we play today. The other major song that you may be aware of, The Black and Blue, we have evidence of earlier. I have sheet music from 1903 of Black and Blue. It was included in the 1903 yearbook. the authors of the yearbook of that year had decided that it was a real shame that there wasn't a unified Hopkins songbook. And so they decided to start one within the pages of the yearbook. And as far as I can tell, that wasn't picked up until 22, when a fraternity on campus pulled together all of the Hopkins songs that were known, many that we play like these, and many that we no longer play. And Gabby ended up arranging them into the versions that we still play today. So you can imagine, out of the early formation of the band, that many of the players ended up being pulled from mandolin club and from the orchestra, and a lot of our repertoire ended up being pulled from the work of the Glee Club. One of the most interesting chapters in the band's history ended up being World War II. We were an ROTC band, so some amount of band involvement in the sort of patriotic military fervor of the time was going to be expected. And Gabby, I imagine, was in an interesting place as a German immigrant. But as soon as the war started, the US government axed ROTC as a program temporarily for the war and replaced it with something called the Army Specialized Training Program. This was a program where the US Army stationed several thousand enlisted troops at major universities across the country to teach them to be engineers and field medics and other sort of specialized roles like that. The band became an official ASTU band, which means for a moment we were in fact an official US Army band, and we ceased all other operations. For the years of the war, everything except our official Army duties stopped, and that was because the overwhelming majority of our players at the time were enlisted soldiers. There were a few non-enlisted civilian members as well, but there was very, very few of them. They were quite the minority. This sort of leads to the first collapse and rebound of the band, because when the Army, nearing the end of the war, not quite the end of the war, but when they realized, oh, this is winding down, we don't need to keep this expensive program alive, pulled all of its enlisted soldiers out of Hopkins. It happened in 2 phases, but the effect was that the band very quickly dwindled to a 3-person combo. It dwindled down to the 3 civilian members of the band. But amazingly, the very next year, it exploded back again in popularity to, as the 1947 yearbook has it, a full 30-piece organization. This photo is sort of special because this is the first post-war band. We know that this photo was taken in November of 1946, the first post-ASTU band that Hopkins had. But the military motif stays around. We retained an ROTC band when ROTC was reinstated after the war. And in a lot of even photos from games in the late 40s and early 50s, you see this maintaining of military dress. We were very, very steeped in a military tradition of bands, and that changes over time, and we'll talk about that. The post-war period starts a lot of new traditions as well. Immediately after the war is when we had our first annual university concert of the band. Eventually, that tradition turns into what we now have as the Wind Ensemble, as a separate organization. But originally, that started by Gabby with the band that was doing ROTC and doing stuff in games in now a concert setting, which you could argue he was a little bit more used to. Over time, the band would grow and grow in its functions. It would eventually incorporate a jazz band, a jazz ensemble. There was a flute choir for quite many years, and a couple other small organizations. I know there was a percussion ensemble for a little while as well. Those traditions really start here. we have we have a motto in the band. The band motto is forcing merriment and mayhem since 1921. And also in the 50s, and actually late 40s into the 60s, we find plenty of articles in the Baltimore Sun of various times that not only Hopkins fans, but the band and Gebby himself stormed onto the field. There's quite an interesting one from the 50s that recalls Gebby raising his baton like a crusader sword and storming onto the field. And order was only restored when the Navy, because it always seemed to be Navy band started the national anthem, and the cadets that had stormed the field to meet us reluctantly returned to their seats. There are stories of this band being a bit more of a force of chaos than we like to be today. Big important point not only for the band but for Hopkins history is women in the band. These two posters I actually have with me here. I can show a little bit, but Hopkins went coeducational in 1970. Fall of 1970 was the first undergraduate women at the university, I believe. That would be embarrassing. I've got that date wrong. However, the band...
Fall of 1970.
Great, thanks. However, the band before that, in the late 60s, had a agreement with Goucher College, which at the time was a women's college, it is no longer a women's college, that they would send several of their musicians to Hopkins to play in the band. This is how the band claims to be the first coeducational student group on campus, because we had women playing in the band before there were undergraduate women on campus. This
was my freshman year, so it would have been the fall of '69, a year before the university went co-ed.
This precipitated a significant cultural change in the band. The band did tour in concert, and I see in internal notes in the band that a lot of where they decided to go embraced the sort of dating culture, as Hopkins was a male-only institution. That disappears fairly quickly once there were women in the band, once there were women at Hopkins, and that function of the band starts to die out. But very quickly, women take up leadership positions in the band. Many, if not, I believe statistically most, though my records are incomplete, of many student leaders post coeducation were women. And that was a big sort of part of our culture of the time. In fact, Gebby wrote a march dedicated to the first group of women in the band called Goucher Girls, which is the primary way that we know exactly who they were. There were these five. I believe, Irv, you knew them personally.
Well, I was in the band at the time. So.
Yeah. They were all students at Goucher College, but made their existence known quite well within the band. And we're very happy to have these sorts of notes to be able to preserve that history. Of course, Gebby, like I said, was around for many, many decades, and eventually the school did want to reward him and honor him. If you go to the stands today, the stands in Homewood Field are named after him. There are two plaques. There's a smaller one that I believe you also saw in the video that played before, that sits right in front of where the band sits in the stadium. That was dedicated in 1967. There's a photo of the dedication here on the left. Much later, those close to Gebby paid for a much larger plaque that sits at the entrance to the stadium if you're coming from campus. This middle photo here shows that larger plaque of him next to the sculptor. This is the sculptor that created that. The last thing that I did want to note here is there was a couple years later, I believe, or if you want to correct me on the year, was the founding of the Gebeline Award, that is given annually to this day to the student that supports the band, supports music on campus. I was this year's holder of it, and I know many other people that have held that position with great pride, holding holding Gebby's name.
I never
But of
recall.
course,
Shortly after Gabby's passing, so it would have been, I guess, the mid 1980s when we got together.
Of course, Gebby wasn't around forever. And since Gebby's retirement, there have been several other directors of the Pep Band, the longest serving of which was Lawrence Springer, all the way to Duane today. And I know, Irv, did you want to jump in and talk about any of these people that you've spent much more time with than I have?
I'll try to jump in briefly. Yeah, but Larry was someone, when Gebby announced he was retiring, we were looking for someone with kind of a similar disposition, not a really like hard-nosed director that was going to drive people out. Larry was my middle school music teacher, and we approached him, and everything worked out well. He was going to take the position and sort of continue the same kind of organization that Gebby had been leading for the past 50 plus years, and which worked out very well. Larry was a Peabody graduate and was very familiar with the Hopkins ways, and led the organization so along with Gebby the first few years, because Gebby still insists on showing up for games and conducting outdoors for over 20 years. And both Jim and Brian, who followed, were students at Peabody that Larry had recruited to play in the band, and had come back later just because of their sort of affinity for the organization, having had fun in the band, came back as directors.
I know a lot of many of our modern traditions that we still hold come from these directors. I think the one that stands out to me the most, we have a tradition of playing the Green Day tune "Holiday" when we know we're about to win. Our version of "Holiday" was arranged by Brian Drake very soon after the song had come out, and I've talked to him a little bit about how that happened. But these directors definitely still have an impact felt on today. And then I did want to say Emily Joseph was a director when I joined. That was my first introduction to the band. And she fairly recently gave way to Duane, who's with us now, and I've loved to work with Duane as well. The other big change for the band is a transition to it being a civilian band. We pushed away from ROTC. I did want to sort of show that happens in the look, so to speak. In the 50s, it was still really common to see a military uniform. This is, I think, one of Gebby's last years. I think this was 71. I think this is the last season that on the left that was taken. By the 60s, we were wearing navy blazers. There's a couple different versions of them. An earlier one has the sort of blue H. Later ones have this crest that we have a bunch of. We have a bunch of examples of these lying around. And we actually do have one of the jackets as well that we keep around. After that, though, the uniform changes. There was a time when we had sweaters around, and then since then, it has been largely a series of different colors, different forms of polo, including the one that I'm wearing right now, which is our current light uniform. So we sort of culturally through the 60s end up pushing away from ROTC, but we still rehearse there. That ends up changing really in 2000. In 2000, the Matten Center gets built, and we stop rehearsing in ROTC. There was an office in that building that we held on to until 2004 or 6, I believe, when we finally turned the keys back over and ceded that back to ROTC. And since then, though we are certainly not ashamed of that history with ROTC, we have been really a civilian band focusing exclusively on our presence at games. The last major chapter in the band that I want to talk about is COVID. I'm sorry for bringing it up. Firstly, I know it wasn't a great time. COVID was rough for the band. It ended up dwindling in size. Recruitment wasn't great. We couldn't come to a lot of games. People staying at home. There was this lovely sets of cardboard cutouts, and I should have thought to grab. I have a couple of them around. That were made of Gebby, of Irv and his wife Kathy, of a few students at the time and alumni. That was set out at games to sort of be there in spirit, even if we couldn't be there in practice. I don't know, Irv, if you wanted to talk any more about this. I was coming right at the end of COVID when I joined the band.
Pretty well described it. This was, I guess, the fall of 20 to spring of 21 season, where there was no one in the stands for the games. We did assemble, a cardboard band to sort of provide quiet support from the stands, and we did include, Gebby as director in this group, and the banana holding down the fort in the back.
Absolutely. But I wanted to end on a more happy note that since COVID, there has been a bit of a post-COVID renaissance. We, a few years ago, were, following fairly low recruitment over COVID. We're left with 5 or 6 students that had come over from previous year that hadn't graduated out, and a lot of us were worried about the future of the band. But largely with the work of other student leaders that I'm happy to have been able to work with and succeed, and with Duane, the band has really grown quite a lot in the past 2 years, and it will continue to grow. Because our upperclassmen classes are quite small as the remnant of COVID. But our lowerclassmen there's a lot of them, and they're really dedicated and they love what they do. We have been able to expand what we do, not just from games, but we've shown up at Convocation, many special events on campus, and the sort of crowning achievement of this past year, and certainly the thing that I think I'm most proud of this band in the past year doing, we got an invitation from the mayor's office to march in Baltimore City's Veterans Day Parade, which I believe is the first Hopkins organization to march in that particular event for the city. It was a flurry of, okay, we haven't marched in a very long time. We've got to teach everyone how to march. We've got to find music and make it work. And it all came together beautifully. And I'm so honored to have been able to honor our city in doing that. That's sort of where I thought I would end it. With this recent upswing, modernization, and growth of the band. And I think it goes back to Duane to moderate any Q&A. I think I might be a little on the early side, but I think that's okay.
Yeah, we will get to the Q&A in a minute, but I did want to just get some more anecdotes and some information, especially from Nicoleen. When exactly did you transition over to Director of Arts and Innovation, and what was going on with the band at that time?
Yeah, so I stepped into my role, which included oversight of the Pep Band and other student organizations in fall of 2019. So we had a few intense months as I acclimated to the new role, and then COVID. Definitely during that time, I mean, everything that Jaekeb said, I've already learned more things and is really accurate. I think during that time, with the student leaders who were still around and wanting to be engaged, it really was a good time to work with them to kind of plan and, reorganize planning for the 100th anniversary of the Pep Band. And even despite some of the challenges around COVID and especially wind instrument playing, that, there could be a really successful relaunch after COVID. And even though that relaunch was slow for a variety of reasons, I really attribute the work of those students and their commitment during that challenging time to then, get to this kind of, another renaissance like Jaekeb talks about. And it's been a real joy and pleasure to support that work as it's gone on.
So maybe also just kind of, you can say with Nicoleen, just kind of a brief overview of like the future of the Pep Band and what's planned and what's going to be happening fairly soon.
Yeah, I mean, I think, and I see my role as supporting the students and the leaders in what they want the Pep Band to do. So I know that there's been a lot of conversations about increasing capacity, increasing the resources that we have for new students coming in so that they can continue to do athletic events, other community events and things around campus, just to continue to spread that spirit. So, there are some sort of organizational and administrative things that may go into that, but I think it's really, looking to the students and the folks who are leading the group to say, what do you want to do? Let's make it happen.
I will jump in a little bit on this and say, athletics and doing we do football, field hockey, basketball, and lacrosse, and that portfolio has expanded a little bit as we want to do both men's and women's sports, but that is and will always be our core, our bread and butter. But we have been trying to do more to both engage with Baltimore City, like we did with the Veterans Day Parade. We feel like it's sort of a responsibility of ours to do that, but engage more with the campus, and we have a bunch of fun little traditions that we do that, including Halloween caroling. This year we did Valentine's bandagrams, those sorts of things that we enjoy. Building that community aspect, which I think the community is really, really important to all of the students here.
Thank you, Jaekeb. Like, don't look at the time, but at this point, I'd love to open things up to our live audience and begin the Q&A portion of the program. As always, I encourage those of you watching live to continue to post questions you have in the Hopkins at Home chat. We will do our best to respond to as many questions as we can in the time we have. I know there were a few questions, and Jaekeb just addressed one of them. There was a question about the sports and so forth, and at least in my philosophy when I got here was that we will play for as many teams as possible. And if we play for men's basketball, we're going to play for women's basketball. And if we play for men's lacrosse, we're going to play for women's lacrosse. In the fall, it's kind of a little different. We have football. And on the other side, and conversely, we play for field hockey. And again, I'm just kind of an advisor, and I'm not like a dictator. I want to make things nice and relax and have the students perform what they want to perform. But I strongly encourage them, that schedule, and they've been great in accepting that idea of making sure that we are performing for both groups. And I know it oftentimes, at least at previous institutions I was at, we'd be one of the few fans in the arena for women's basketball, and the women's teams are just so much more appreciative of what we did and reach out to us, and the response has always been terrific from them. Trying to go back here to let's see, some other questions. There were some definitely comments. Oh yeah, there was a question about from Jack. Do I remember correctly that the band used to march at games? When has on-field marching come and gone through its time, and are there plans to bring it back? We addressed that a little bit in the Veterans Day Parade, at least getting moving and playing again. Irv can correct me, and I think the last time the band had marched was 1981, something around that.
Sounds about right. It was.
Gotcha.
And I know we included in the promo page the picture of us marching on the field of the Astrodome back then.
Gotcha. And
that was a regular thing, but it faded after the years.
Yeah, it faded like in, like you said, around 81 or early 80s.
Around then, yeah.
Yeah. So as Jaekeb was going through the history of the band, we've seen this, seen pictures and seen evidence of marching and forming an H or JHU or other graphics on the field and marching on the field, off the field. And we had talked about, boy, it'd be great to really bring this back somehow at some point. And we just need to have the right number of students or instrumentation to do that. And we are just, what I think, we're just about there, and it just happened that an invitation came in to perform in the Veterans Day Parade. And may have been a little ahead of schedule, but it was really up to Jake, through Jaekeb's work and the work with the other student leaders of the group to really make that happen. Again, I just guided them, but the interest, the commitment, and the rehearsal all came from students. It was all student focused. And we really, I don't know, rushed, but we really worked to make that happen. And I thought it came out great. I think that the kids, the students really enjoyed it. And it's something that now we're going to maintain, hopefully. We did lead at alumni weekend, a couple weekends ago. We led a procession from the crab cake luncheons. That's the right term there? Crab cake luncheon to the field for the lacrosse game. And after that, we got a request from athletics that asked, hey, can you guys do that in the fall for the football games and kind of process through campus to try to drum up some spirit and so forth for the games. So we have that in the works. We're not quite at the point where we can be on the field, but that is in the plans, whether immediate or a little bit longer.
I will also just mention quickly, Duane gives me probably too much credit. I was very lucky to have an incredibly strong and active and interested board behind me that has grown over the past few years to accommodate all of the expansion that we've been doing. I believe now, including section leaders, we're up to about 9, I think, board members that run this whole thing. So I'm happy to have served the role that I did, but there's a lot of student engagement that goes into making this organization run.
Well, thanks for that, Jaekeb. I just want to make sure the students get the recognition they deserve for the hard work on this. Trying to go to, there was an interesting question from Erica, and maybe Jaekeb or Irv can answer this. Asked, has the danger punch gone away? I have no clue what that is.
I know what this is. I'm going to say that yes, but also maybe that this isn't quite this isn't quite the forum for that particular alcoholic conversation.
Yeah, I was going to answer that. Basically, once I started working for the police department, I tried to avoid association with any underage drinking. So I had not experienced a danger punch, in many years. But yeah, there were. I heard that we used to always have a punch after the band concerts, and occasionally somehow alcohol would find its way into the otherwise non-alcoholic punch. So I assume that was a band tradition that lived on in various forms over the years.
I have seen the recipe for it, but in a formalized capacity, no, it's no longer a thing, and that's probably for the best.
I'm glad to hear that.
I have to admit, I would miss. I didn't even think of the fact that it was a beverage. I thought it was a physical action or something. That's how way removed I am from this. All right. Let's see if there's other questions. Quick question. Erica asked if we have memorabilia, where can we send it? Right. I think I have a few things from when we cleaned out the ROTC office in the summer of 1998.
I could take this one a little bit. I've been working with Hopkins. I had a meeting with a conservator to talk through the things that we do have. We have a whole collection of historical uniforms. I have some of Gabby's original music and posters, and we have vinyl records and magnetic tapes. We've been working on getting the resources to physically store them. A lot of it we've turned over to the school archives, what they really take, but there's a lot of things that they aren't. I think if I would love if you could ship them into, I don't know what the band's actual what address we receive packages from, and how that works. But if you have things, oh,
I just put, and if there's a way to share it, but just something could be shipped to me, Nicoleen Willson at the Office of the Arts. The General University address is 3400 North Charles Street, Baltimore, Maryland 21218. I'm currently in Garland Hall, but they'll find me. So, but feel free to follow up any other way to if you want to do that, because we would love to have it. We were just talking about some opportunities to maybe display some memorabilia in the student center, which will be opening in the fall, and then also especially connected with the sesquicentennial. I also saw the note about the reissue of the Hopkins songbook as something for that, and I have colleagues who are working on some of those. So noted, and please be in touch. Thank you for that.
The 1922 songbook is in the possession of special collections at Sheridan Libraries. So anything of that nature would involve them, and that would be yeah.
Yeah, it was reissued a while ago, but it's been reprinted before. So
we had another question from Jack. It was answered in the Hopkins at Home chat, but I wanted to just address it here. Asked, will this be available for prospective students and college counselors to view? Would be a great recruiting tool for high school students. Yes, this presentation is being recorded and it will be preserved, and we will definitely exploit it to the best of our abilities to recruit members. It's a little different in recruiting these days. I don't know how it was back. Maybe Irv can talk about it back then, but since Hopkins has become so popular, and I think we're at a 9% acceptance rate, we don't have a lot of opportunity to recruit prior to students being really accepted, because we don't really have an idea on how that's gonna pan out. But we do have a robust, starting last year, robust recruitment program. Once students are accepted to the university, reaching out, the e-board and the students take the lead in communication. I contact maybe some key players, like maybe we need another tuba player or some specialized instrument I want to reach out to. But we're definitely going to be putting it into our social media, and we have, with the new board, we're going to be revitalizing some of the social media venues and how should I say, portals that we've been taking advantage over the last couple of years to build a membership. I know we don't have a lot of time left, but at least real quick, how did recruitment work in the past, Irv?
pretty much the same, minus the social media aspect of it. But notices used to go out in the accepted students packets, and the band would have a booth at orientation or whatever was done back then to recruit students into the band. But again, like myself, most of us were people that played in high school and come looking for a band when they come to college. So that part is pretty much self-motivating, but it always requires a little bit more outreach for people that just don't see themselves as serious musicians and don't want to be in pep band or those kinds of things, to try to communicate how much fun we do have, and the fact that some of us hang around for 50 plus years because we enjoyed it.
And quick fact check, and I looked to make sure that what I remembered, but we're currently at a 4% acceptance rate.
Okay, so so hopefully that's
in case anyone, yeah.
Hopefully in that group we get a lot of band instrument players. So, is another question from Howard. Is there going to be greater financial support for the band? I've heard the band has not been able to go to some away games because there was no transportation provided. Yeah, there had been some funding challenges, but also a lot of it had to do with the great increase in costs of traveling. I've been doing this for a while, and I remember I used to be able to, contract a coach bus for an in-state trip for $1,000 or what have you. Or if we do an overnight, then it would be, out of state, maybe 5,000. But the costs have just been so outrageous lately that, especially if we had a plan that is like a last minute thing or some kind of a, tournament trip, then we try to knock on all doors to make that happen. But I want to use this kind of for maybe the last minute or two to kind of segue to Nicoleen and how her office supports the Pep Band and what we do.
Yeah, I mean, as I shared a little bit, I mean, myself and my office and staff, I mean, are really look to support what the desire of the students is. When it comes to the Pep Band, it's really upholding that tradition and moving forward, as an organization and in size. And I think that's some of, going to the question about transportation and funding is advocating for what the needs are, even when the costs are rising and there are challenges, to really work with the students to find out what they want to do, what they can do as they're very busy, and to try to support them through that. And then also come up with some more repeatable systems and a structure that helps to keep that really consistent. And I think as we've talked about all of these changes, through things like COVID or structural changes in the university, just kind of navigating that and finding the best fit for that. And like Jaekeb said, working with him and other student leaders and then the new incoming leaders, is kind of how we chart that path forward.
Thank you for that. I mean, one last question before we wrap up was when did the band stop performing concerts in Shriver? I can address it quickly. Well, it's actually, I probably should turn it over probably to Nicoleen and talk about that transition to the Interfaith Center and the Wind Ensemble.
Yeah, actually, I don't know that answer either. I've been at Hopkins since 2011, and once in a while there were wind ensemble concerts in Shriver, although not consistently. So when the Matten Center went away, then the wind ensemble and the jazz band have been primarily at the Interfaith Center. Rehearsals will be back at the Student Center when that opens, but I'm not... Aside from knowing that the wind ensemble did perform maybe either sometimes or most of the time their concerts in Shriver, they would also perform in other locations like the Glass Pavilion and Great Hall. But recently it's been in the Interfaith Center, which although sometimes logistically is a little tricky, is a pretty good space for a concert like that with a smaller ensemble.
Yeah, from my memory, up until COVID, we did have fall and spring concerts in Shriver, and we did one annual Pops concert in the Glass Pavilion, plus occasional concerts at other venues. But we'd have the two per year plus one in the Glass Pavilion.
Yeah.
Cool. Well, thanks for that information. And we'll look at the future performances in Shriver, maybe the Pep Band in concert in Shriver, one of these days. We're going to end there. Thank you. That was a fantastic note to end on, and believe it or not, we're already at the top of the hour. Huge thank you to Jaekeb, Irv, and Nicoleen for sharing your stories, insights, and Pep Band pride with us today. It's been such a joy to relive the energy and mayhem that makes this band such a special part of the Hopkins student life. And thank you to everyone who joined us. We hope you'll check out more free virtual events like this one at hopkinsathome.jhu.edu, where you can explore what's coming up and browse our library recorded programs. Thanks again, and here's to many more years of music, spirit, and merriment. Have a wonderful afternoon.